Hello, my name's Claire Welling and I work for West Yorkshire Community Accounting Service. In this video, I'm going to show you a cash book system which we have developed, which will be useful for tracking the funds and the transactions for your organisation or community group. So what will this spreadsheet do? It is free and it's downloadable from the WYCAS website. I'll show you exactly where in due course. It will work in Excel and other spreadsheet software packages. It will give a format for listing transactions with a page for each bank and each cash account. It will make the reconciliation of these accounts easier. It allows you to record by fund so you can track different restricted funds. It produces a simple cash-based report at the year end. It also produces a report by fund which can be used to review the position throughout the year. So what this spreadsheet won't do, it does not report receipts and payments by months, but instead as a running total for each bank and cash account. The reporting pages bring together the transactions on all of these accounts. It has no facility to raise invoices or to track those due to be received. Bills are recorded only as they're paid. It is not structured to record non-cash or non-bank transactions. For this reason, it will not produce accruals accounts, although having a reconciled cash book is the first stage in doing so. So where do you find this spreadsheet? If you go to the WYCAS website, and you can see the web address here, wycas.org.uk, and you go under the Help and Advice ribbon, you'll see an option with Tools in it. So when you click on that, it will bring up a number of options. Unfortunately, right at the very top of this list, we have Accounting Records Tools and Cash Book with Year-End Reporting. You'll notice there are several versions of the cash book. However, the top one is the one we're interested in today. The others just give extended fund options, more bank accounts and more receipt categories. If you click within the cash book with year-end reporting Excel format and opt to download, the Excel spreadsheet will be downloaded and it will open in whatever software is detected that it thinks it will operate best in. If you have Excel, it will be in Excel. So we'll just click Enable Editing to move on with this. So here we have the spreadsheet which has a number of different tabs or sheets within it, as you can see along the bottom here. So I'm going to talk you through this spreadsheet tab by tab so you can see how it all works and hangs together. The first sheet, the details sheet, is your setup page. You can overwrite anything that's in blue. So your organisation's name would go in the top here, the last day in the financial year here, and here where we have funds on the left hand side, this would be different funding award pots that you had received. For example, you might have some awards for all funding or some other restricted funds that you would name here. The categories column lists the categories of transaction. There are two default ones, balance brought forward and transfer, and I'll explain those in the course of this video. The green ones, numbered 1 to 10 here, are for different types of receipt or income. So you might have grants, you might have donations or contributions. You can make these whatever suits your organisation best to describe them. Similarly, you have up to 25 payment categories, which are for items that you pay out, for example, salaries, room hire, rent, these sorts of things. Also on this details page, there are instructions and some warnings which will help you out if you go wrong. The bank reconciliation sheet is the next one. Forgive me, I'm just going to leave this for the moment. We'll come back to it later in the example. Now we move on to the recording sheets. there are 4 of these in this default version: current, deposit, cash and spare. Each of them looks the same. It's only up here in the middle that you can see which one you're actually in. So this says current account, and it's intended to be the main bank account for the organisation. So the theory is you record along each row the details of the transaction. When you come to fund, you will see that drop-down list links back to the list that you created in the detail sheet. And similarly, for the category entry, that links back to the categories you created in the detail sheet. You will need to go down the list rather to get to the payment categories. Then it's just a matter of recording whether the money came in or went out. The balance will calculate automatically, and you just keep listing your transactions as the months go on. So as I say, this is the same for the next 4 sheets in this example: the current, deposit in case you have a deposit account, cash for your petty cash transactions, and another spare one. That's it for the input sheets. All of the sheets from this year-end accounts onwards are reporting sheets that pick up from the information that you've put in. So the receipts and payments account, the year-end and the name of the organisation will be picked up from the detail sheet, and it will pick up all the transactions that you put in. It treats anything that's other than unrestricted as restricted funds in this. Okay, and at the bottom of this sheet you have the balances held in each account and a little statement saying that these accounts were approved on behalf of the management committee. So if you were able to type in the previous year's figures, it would pick up the figures for this year, and you could then format this report and present it as the accounts for your group, if you're just a small group. Now we'll move on to what is, in my opinion, the most useful of these reports. This is the total receipts and payment account. So as you can see, it looks similar to the year-end accounts in that you've got all your receipt and payment categories which you've entered. However, along the top it has the different funds, and these names will change when you put them into your detail sheet. So for any one fund you could see what had been received, what had been paid out, and therefore your net receipt or payments together with your balance brought forwards on that fund to give you on this bottom row here, row 50, the balance of that fund at any moment in time. So this is a really useful report for during the course of the year, and could be presented to your management committee to show them the position. Following that, the next reports in this sheet link just to one of the accounts. So this R&P current, receipts and payment current, will just show the transactions that have gone through the current bank account. Similarly, deposit, cash and spare. Called the Altogether Community Association. So I type the organisation's name in on row 2 over WYCAS example. So it's going to be Altogether Community Association. And the last day in the financial year which we're reporting on is going to be the 31st of March 2018. I realise the years may be somewhat out, however it doesn't matter, it will work whichever year you're using. So now this organisation has some categories and funds to set up at the start of the year. So it knows that it has some unrestricted funds, it knows that it also has a balance from the community fund, and it has some Lloyd's money, and it has some Halifax money, or it may in the course of the year, and it has some MICE money. In Leeds anyway, MICE money is for members' improvements in the community and environment, and it's little pots of money that the councillors can give to support local groups. It's always restricted to things such as a Christmas entertainment do or a trip to the seaside, so it always needs tracking as a different fund. Now for the categories. If you don't know what to create as your categories, you could look at your previous year's accounts and this will give you some good clues. So we've got the two default ones, balance brought forward and transfer, and now I'm going to start typing in the other ones. So they have grants, donations, members' subscriptions, fundraising income, bank interest, coffee morning, raffle, and bingo. So remember, these categories are what makes sense to you and what will be useful for you to see in your reports. And in the payment categories here, I have a list already prepared, and as I say, you may use them from your previous year's accounts. So we've got salaries, payroll charges, staff recruitment, travel, volunteers travel, as opposed to paid staff members, refreshments, rent and rates, utilities, cleaning and sundries, printing and stationery, phone and internet, bear with me, we're nearly there, postage, publications and subscriptions, and equipment. It's worth spending the time to type these correctly and try and avoid typos, because this is how they will appear in the reporting pages. I can show you that now. So if we look at the year-end accounts page, we can see we have the name of the group at the top here. Unfortunately, it's a bit squashed because of the length of the name. We'd do something about that if we were printing the accounts. Also, you can see that the categories of receipt and payments have appeared in this report here, as long as the correct year end. If we look at the total R&P report, along the top now, we also have the different fund names for those that we've typed in. Oops, so I can immediately see here I've made a little mistake in that I missed spare fund 3 and left a gap before I had to put Halifax and mice. So let me just put that right. So I copy those over there and make that spare fund 5. Okay. So now that's nice and orderly and I've got my spare funds at the end. Okay, so now I'm set up and I'm ready to start my recording. So the financial year for this group is going to start on the 1st of April. And at that point in time, it had £62.34 in its bank, in the Todmorden Community Bank current account. And of this, £50 was mice money that they hadn't spent from the year before, and the remainder was unrestricted funds. So I'm going to go in my current sheet and put in my opening entries. So this is the first day of the financial year, 1/4/17, and I have an opening balance of £50, which is the mice money, which I will choose the fund for. So it's the mice fund, and the category is balance brought forward, and that was £50. So as soon as I type that, you can see some calculations going on over here in the balance columns. Okay, so on the same day, because this is more of the opening balance, I'm going to record the rest of the balance to unrestricted funds. So it's unrestricted, it's balance brought forward, and I know in total I had £62.34. So in the unrestricted, it's going to be £12.34. I've got a little check here that it comes to £62.34 together, and I'm set up with my opening balance. Throughout this, you can keep looking at the reporting pages, and you will see now in the total R&P, I now have some figures in the unrestricted balance brought forward and the MICE balance brought forward. So I'm going to make up a few transactions now, and we'll record these so you can see how this happens. So on the 6th of April, the following two items are expected on the same day. A quarterly grant from the Community Fund of £3,000, and this is for salaries, and it has a reference number 1. This is going to be paid by electronic transfer. And together with that, a donation of £800 from Halifax plc for computer equipment, paid by WYCAS. So I go here and I put the date, 6th of the 4th, and I'm in 2017. My reference number 1 is for this grant from the Community Fund. So it's a grant for the first quarter, so I'm going to put that in this transaction details. You can use anything you like in this transaction details, hopefully to clarify the transaction to yourself. If it were a payment, I would have the name of the person I were paying. This reference field should tie up to your paperwork. So you may have a grant award letter or something that could tie back to. So here I'm choosing Community Fund. And what category was it? Well, it's an income category and it was a grant received. So we had £3,000, or we were expecting £3,000 in on that day. And on the same day, I'm going to use Control-C and Control-V, V to copy and paste. And the reference number is 2. And this one is from Halifax for computer equipment. So I can use this field to remind myself that this money was for computer equipment. I've got my fund set up, Halifax, and this was actually a donation because it was an unsolicited donation. It wasn't a grant for this, and I had 800 in. Okay. Next on my list I have the 8th of April. First receipt of Lloyds Bank Foundation grant for £7,500. So I'm going to use 3 for my reference number, and it was from Lloyds Bank, and it was a grant for £7,500. Okay, I'm just doing all the income ones first. 22nd of April, we've paid in 3 things together. We've paid in some members' subscriptions of £25, together with the takings from a raffle of £200. So this reference number should tie up to 2 different receipts. We'll go with our number 4 for the first part of this, and this will be member subscriptions. You may want to put the names, or you may be able to say it was from Thursday's Ladies, or anything that clarifies it is always going to be a help. So it's member subscriptions, and because they're towards the general running of the organisation, I'm going to call that unrestricted in funds. But we have a category for recording it, member subscriptions, and that was £25. And this was banked together with the takings from a raffle of £200. So even though they're banked together, they've got separate reference papers and they go on separate lines, and they have to go on separate lines because they have different income categories, receipt categories. So the raffle takings were £200. So to make sure that I've accounted for the right amount of money, I can highlight both the cells in this block and I can check at the bottom of my screen what they sum to. It's a ridiculous example. I know we can all add 200 plus 25, but it shows you that it does that adding up for you. Okay, so shall we have a quick look at the total R&P to see how that looks on the income side? So you can see now it's picking up by fund the different types of income and by the different types of funder as well. So that's satisfactory. Let me record some payments now. So the first payment I have is on the 2nd of April. And this is the date I wrote my cheque number 101. The cheque reference number is actually a really good reference number because it's useful for reconciling, and it's a good way in which you could file your payment documentation. This was a payment made to West Yorkshire Press. And it's for the cost of advertising the new staff posts. So the Community Fund have agreed that the recruitment costs can be charged to their fund. So I'm going to put that payment to the Community Fund pot. And this was payment of staff recruitment charges. So that's my payment category. Remember, it's got to go in the money out column now. So we've paid £95.50 for that. Okay. So I'm going to go on with some more examples recording like this. Cheque number 102 was made to refund one of our staff members. Sorry, not a staff member, a volunteer for her spend at the post office. So I'm going to put who I've paid because I think that might be useful if Sarah were to come back and say, I haven't been paid for that. So Sarah was paid back £21.50, £19 for stamp and £2.50 for photocopying. We're in a fortunate position in that we have a grant that is towards running costs, and that's the Lloyds grant, so I'm going to put all these to that. I need to split it between the two elements of her spend because they're different payment categories. So £19 for stamps, so that's postage. And the remaining £2.50 was for photocopying. So I think I have a printing and stationery example. Because the rest of the details are the same, I'm going to highlight that little block, do Control and C, and then Control and V to paste the rest of the details, because they relate to the same receipt, the same documentation. Okay, next, raise a cheque on the 8th of April for £70 for petty cash. Now, this is quite interesting because we are not actually spending anything when we remove the money to petty cash, but we do need to record it coming out of the bank because otherwise our bank will never reconcile. So this is where we use the transfer category. I'm going to choose Fund Unrestricted for all transfers and Transfer as the category. So it's money going out of the bank, £70. And this time I need to record the money going in to cash for £70. So this is my first entry on my cash sheet. And it is for the date 8th of April. Cheque number 100. And I could put in here it's from the bank, from the current account. Make sure I choose the fund unrestricted and the category transfer. And in this case you've got money in for £70. So now on this sheet I can see I should have £70 in my cash tin. And I've got transfer out of one account and into the other. If I look at the total R&P, the transfer rows totals 0, and it should total 0. If I looked at just the bank transactions, I would see a transfer of £70 out of the bank, which is right, that's what we've recorded. And if I look at the cash sheet, I'll see on my transfers row I have £70 in cash. So that's all as it should be, and it kind of makes sense, but it's just getting your head around how to record that on your recording sheet. So transfers, always from unrestricted funds, always choose the transfer, remember to put it in 2 places on the spreadsheet. Next, I've got an invoice from Viking Direct for £193.75 for stationery. Okay. I need a reference number for this as it's not a cheque. I'm going to be paying them by electronic transfer. So you should create your own referencing system. You might call it E1. So as for electronic transfers, you can create whatever system makes sense to you and that anybody looking at your accounts would be able to find the documentation. So you'll have a section in your file that's for electronic transfers. And this is running costs, so it can be funded by Lloyds, and it was for stationery. So let's find that, stationery. There we are, £193.75. Then we have a payment on the 13th of April to Hewlett Packard, and it's an electronic payment again, so I can call that E2. So this one will be funded from the Halifax pot, because remember they gave me the donation for computer equipment. Category of spend, I think I have one called equipment, there we are, and it cost me £660. Okay, so if we take a brief look at the total R&P, it's worth keeping an eye on this as you go along. You can see that the monies are now being picked up, the spend is being picked up as well, and you can see the balances on all of your funds. So the Halifax fund, which was for computer equipment, we've had 800 in, but we've spent 660 now, so we've got 140 left. Now we have a rather more complicated example, because we have a payment made to our payroll bureau for a salary costs. Now, of course, the bureau charges you the cost of the pay itself plus their administration charges. And that's usually a total amount that you will pay out to them. So this is an example of needing to split it over a number of lines because there's different elements to that charge. So we have Val Payroll, and that's who we're paid. The first part of the fee is £35 payroll registration fee. So it's to do with the salary, so I'm going to charge it to the community fund. It is a category of payroll charges and it's £35. Then I have the monthly payroll admin charge, which is £13.50. So even though it is from the same fund and it's actually a payment on the same day, I'm opting to record that on separate lines so I can see that the initial registration fee is separate to the monthly fee. And I could even change the text to clarify that registration fee. And on this one, it's the monthly fee. Now we know that in total we had to pay Val £1,521.93, but that was for all 3 elements of this payment. So we want this amount to be 1,521.93 less this, less this. We can do that as a formula within the cell. So equals 1,521.93 minus this 35 minus this 1350, and it will calculate it for us within the cell. I need to make sure we're recording to our funds here. and which category was it? So we've got salaries and the same date. Okay. Next we've got a payment to our member of staff. Be devoted. Check number 103. Be devoted. Was paid that for travel expenses of £30. So travel expenses come from our running costs, and we have got a spend category called travel, so that will be that £30. 23rd of April, we're paying BT through a direct debit. So again, you might have a category within your expenditure file where the paperwork for BT lives. So that would be a reference direct debit at BT. You could find it within your file, and that's what we're seeking. That's a running cost. So it can go to Lloyd's, and it is for phone and internet. So there we are. And look, as I choose that, I spot that I have a typo in here. I'll come back to that in just a moment. That's £75. So if you spot a typo like that, it's worth going back to where you originally recorded it, so in your detail sheet, and correcting it, because remember, this is how it will appear in your accounts. If you do that though, every time you've used it in a recording sheet, you need to correct that recording, because otherwise the report won't be able to pick it up. So let's find that again, the corrected version. Oops. Phone and internet. There we are. So now it will be able to pick it up fine. Now I've just got a few more transactions to record. 25th of April. Electronic payment, so that's going to be E3 to Third Sector Magazine. Typing under pressure. So again, that's going to come from Lloyd's funding because it's a running cost. And which payment category does it belong to? It belongs to publications and subscriptions, and that was £40. Now, on the 27th of April, Be Devoted, here, returns the cheque number 103 as it's incorrectly made out. So cheque number 103 has to be cancelled. Traditionally in bookkeeping, we would record that in again, but as a negative figure, so it offsets that. However, I have an alternative to this, which is to record clearly the transaction that it's been voided and to overwrite the amount with 0. So it's never going to go through the bank, so you won't need to reconcile it. And it's clearly recorded that the cheque's been voided, so it's not a problem. The only time that may be a problem is if you've already reported to the funder that it had been spent. Then you should go back to the original way and record it as income or negative expenditure to offset it. Okay, and then the 27th of April, of course, we've got to replace that cheque for Be Devoted. Take off the voided this time because this is the live cheque now. And it's running cost and it's travel. So I'm using my Control C and Control V a fair bit. £30. Okay, last transaction for April. 30th of April. We've got an electronic transfer to Lovely Landlords. And this is for rent and rates. And Lloyd's will fund this as well, because it's a running cost. This time we have paid them £200. What reference number have we got? Well, hopefully we've got an invoice from the landlords that we can tie it up to, and that would be E even 4. There we are. So now we've got all that month's bank transactions recorded in here. And if we look at the R&P current, so remember this is only the transactions that have gone through the bank account, you can see that we've had 11,525 in through the bank. We've spent 2,837, so we've got net receipts of 8,687. Okay, and our balance brought forward and net of our transfer as well. So we know in theory what we've got in our bank account, but what have we got in reality? We're coming to the bank reconciliation exercise. Imagine this. On the left-hand side of your screen is the bank statement that you've received from the bank, and on the right of the screen, this should look familiar. This is the current account transactions we've been recording. So how do we go through matching up and reconciling? Initially, we want to find each of the transactions in the bank statement. So we've got a starting balance of £62.34. Can we see that in our cash book? Well, we can see the first two lines come to that £62.34. So because I can see them both, I'm going to put an X in this box, column I. You can use any symbol you like to show that it has cleared, and I'm going to mark it on my bank statement as well to show that it's matched up. The next thing that happens on the bank is we've got 3,000 coming in. We can see that's from the community fund. Can we see that in our cash book? Well, yes we can, and there it is. Then we've got 800 in on the bank from donations, ticking it off on my bank statement and ticking it off on my cash book. £95.50 was paid for staff recruitment, and there it is in our cash book. Happy with that. Then we've got a credit for £225. So I'm remembering now that's these two items that were paid in cash together. Can check using the date, and I might be able to check using the paying in slip if we've used that in our book. So I'm marking those off. Check number 102 for £21.50. So I can see it here. And I think this row actually does have a check number on it, so we can confirm that matches up. Oops. Now we can see a big payment in through our bank of the 1521.93 that was paid to the payroll bureau. So that should match these three transactions. Using our little trick of blocking them together and looking at the foot of the Excel workbook, we can see they sum to 1521.93, so that does match the bank. So I'm happy to mark all of those off as cleared the bank, and this one on the bank statement itself. BT has been paid £75, so I can mark that off. Viking £193.75, so that's up here. And finally on our bank statement, £660 to Hewlett Packard. There we are. So we're done with the bank statement now because we matched everything that's on the statement onto our sheet. So let's close that. So now I'm going to see what I've not marked in my cash book. So all of these transactions that do not have anything against them have not cleared the bank. So that includes a deposit from Lloyds and some payments at the foot here. This 0 was our voided cheque, if we recall, so it's never going to go through the bank, so we can mark it with an X. This is where this bank reconciliation screen comes in handy now. At the top of it, we have a chunk which tells us it's about the current account. It asks us for the final date on the statement, so that statement's final date was the 30th of April. And the balance at our foot of our statement was 144,966. So we'll put that in that box. This balance here links to the current sheet, and it's the balance of everything we've recorded in there. So if everything we'd recorded in had gone through, the balance would be 867,966. So what we're after is explaining the difference between what the actual bank statement says and what our register says, cash register. So this first box is for us to record any unpresented deposits, and we know we've got one of these. We've recorded £7,500 coming in and it's not been received. So we'll copy from that row some of the figures and copy it into this box in the bank reconciliations. Should fit in just nicely. You may end up with hashes here. That just means the column is not quite wide enough to show the date. So if you double click at the top here, it automatically sets it to the width it needs to be. There are no other receipts in our cash book that haven't yet cleared, but there are 3 payments. There are these 3. They haven't yet cleared the bank. So if we mark those or select those and copy, we copy them into this second part of our bank reconciliation template, and those columns should match up again. So those 3 together total 270. This adjusted balance takes, you can see, cell I11 plus I25 minus I47. So I11 is the balance on the statement plus the uncleared deposit, I25, less the uncleared cheques, I47. And when you compare that to the cash book balance, the difference is 0. So that means you have reconciled it. You can do this repeatedly through the course of the year. However, be aware that this amount will change every time you alter the amounts in the current account. I actually recommend most groups just to do it like this throughout the year, to put crosses on as things have cleared the bank. It's fairly easy to spot where anything hasn't cleared, and if you wanted to record it on the bank statement itself, the items that hadn't cleared, and show that it reconciled, that's probably a good place to record it. So that's the bank transactions recorded and now reconciled. Let's look at the cash recording. So we might have some cash transactions, we might have petty cash payments, or we might even have some receipts into petty cash to record as well. I'm just going to record a couple of these so you get the idea. I've got a petty cash voucher. It's called petty cash voucher number 1, and it was paid out of the cash tin on the 7th of April. And it was paid to J. Edwards. It was for 2 things, for stamps and stationery. So we just need to be a little bit careful we don't trip ourselves up, because they are recorded into 2 different categories, so they'll have to split across 2 lines. We're still back to the principle that Lloyds are funding all of these running costs. So we've got some stamps, so that needs to come under postage, and the stamps were £2.70. And we've got some stationery, and that was £1. So let's make that category this stationery. Again, funded by Lloyds, but all the other details are the same as in the earlier line. So Control C and Control V. So at that point I had £66.30 left in my cash tin. I could check that. So you should be able to record any cash payments, referring them back to the petty cash vouchers. So another thing that might happen is you record income into your petty cash, and this may be perfectly legitimate. Of course, it is good practice to pay all incoming funds into the bank as early as possible. But let's pretend for this group that they are going to receive some money in from a coffee morning that they've held on the 9th of April. And this has a voucher number and I could put petty cash B instead of a 123 because that's spend. And in this case we've received £32 in total, and it was received on our Tuesday coffee morning. We've received £28 from the coffee morning itself, £2 from the bingo and £2 from the raffle. So because of the way we've structured our cash book recording system, we're going to need to record those into 3 different categories. So we've got the £28 from the coffee morning itself. So that's coffee morning, money in, 28. And the same details are going to be used for the next two lines. But one of them was for bingo and one of them was for raffle. Okay, so our cash balance should have been £98.30 in this case. So remember, the transfers can go two ways. So we might have thought, oh, that's a lot of money to be sitting in our cash. I'll pay some into the bank. So on the 10th of April, we might have made a unrestricted transfer out of cash. Say we paid £50 into the bank, and then we'd record it into the bank sheet. So on the bank sheet now, recording the transfer in. Okay, so that is it for recording the transactions. I just wanted to give you a few warnings about particular issues that might crop up. So here's a problem busting section. It's a few problems that groups have had in using this system. Number one, when you're giving the names to your receipt categories, make them different to the names in your payment categories. So for example, coffee mornings here could be coffee morning receipts or coffee morning payments. So just make sure you're not using a duplicate name. Even go so far as to call them coffee morning receipts and coffee morning payments. If you use the same title, it will confuse the reports because it won't know which ones to pick up in which sections. Another issue that comes up, and this is the most frequently occurring one, is when you go to the reports page, you get this big warning error in sheet. This happens because the numbers that have been picked up in this reporting page sum together and give a different figure to that that's picked up as the balance on all of the accounts. So the balance on the accounts come to 8777.96 and the balance on the report comes to 8977.96. So the difference is this 200. So here's where we have to get our detective's hat on. Which account has this occurred in? So you can look in your different reports to work out which account the problem is in. So the R&P current has the warning sign, so it's probably in that one. The R&P cash, which is the other one we're using at the moment, doesn't have a warning sign, so the problem is with our current recording. And the problem is with £200 in our current recording. So armed with this information, we can go back to our current recording sheet and first of all, just cast an eye down the funds and categories. If there are any blank entries in either of those columns, that will likely be the cause of the problem. So in this one, we've forgotten to give rent and rates a fund. So that came from Lloyd's. And in this case, that has enabled that £200 figure to be picked up and our warning sign has disappeared. 99 times out of 100, that is the problem. The recorder has forgotten to give one of the transactions either a fund or a category. Remember, if you don't know what to look for, you have this warnings trouble buster on the front page, and you can always refer back to that to look for some clues as to how to track down what your problem is. There is quite a lot of protection on these recording sheets, so you can't click into the balance, for example, you can't insert rows, and that is to try and avoid corrupting the formulae within the sheet. If you wanted to, you could always go into this review ribbon and unprotect the sheet. There is no password on it. You can do that. It will then enable you to insert rows, for example. However, I would just advise you to copy down this balance formula if you're doing that. Other than that, there's not really a problem with it. You can insert them in. Depends how confident you are in Excel. Clearly, you could also do functions such as data filter if you wanted to interrogate your data further. So one more thing that you may want to do that we haven't covered, and that is a genuine transfer of money between different funds. So no money is actually moving anywhere, but you say you had some restricted money that the funder had given you specific advice on, saying that you could use it for an unrestricted purpose. Be very careful here. You must have the funder's approval to do this. The way in which you could do this then, and let's just look at one that we could do. So say the Halifax said, okay, that remaining 140, you can use it to anything you like in your unrestricted funds. So I'm going to use my cash sheet for recording this. I could do it on any of them. It's not going to appear on anything. So say they approved that on the last day of April. I'm going to transfer funds out of my Halifax funds. So that's the transfer out of there, and it's the 140. And I must have the counterside to that, so it's a transfer into my unrestricted funds. Okay, so let's have a look at the impact of that on our reports. So on the community fund, the Halifax, we have a transfer of 140 out of there. That's what red and in brackets means, a negative figure. And we have a transfer into our unrestricted funds. Generally, don't worry if you don't understand that and just avoid doing it. It is a nicety of using the system. If you can record the basic transactions, that is sufficient. Okay, so nearly there, just a couple more things to mention before I let you go. Firstly, remember to save this as you're going along. You don't want to put in all the work and then not have a copy of this saved anywhere. So give it a name, save it to your desktop or somewhere you can find it easily. Be a bit wary of having duplicate copies or too many people involved in the recording. It can get confusion as to which one's the most up-to-date and the most complete version. Coming back to the reports, and I've been talking about these being good reports to send to or present to your management committee, you'd like to do a bit of tidying up in order to do these. So I would recommend that you hide any columns that you're not using. So select any unused, and if you right click, you can hide those. And similarly with any rows that you're not using, just select and hide. People often ask me, how do I then unhide? The way you unhide is to choose the selection over which you have your hidden rows, and again right click and you've got an unhide option. Okay, I'm just going to undo that. So now this is starting to look a bit more condensed and a bit more like something you could present to your management committee. Here, to be pedantic, we're not using the deposit account or the spare, so I'm going to hide those as well. And if I opt to do a print preview of this, I can see that that's perfectly condensed and sufficient for the management committee to make some decisions and to be fully appraised of the financial position. Similarly with your year-end accounts then, as I say, or I warned you earlier, these figures have been pulled through into this page. You would need to type in the comparator figures from the previous year, but again you would hide any rows that you weren't using. So for example these and these. And you're getting to a point where these accounts would look reasonable for your year-end accounts. Let's just have a look. So that would be a perfectly adequate statement to submit for your year-end accounts. So you will need a new spreadsheet for this each year. it only runs for one financial year, or it's a continual recording. So each year I would suggest that you download it from the WYCAS website, just because sometimes the template is tweaked a little and improved with each year. So there we are. I hope this video has given you some insight into how you could use the system, what it could do for you, and how you would combat some of the problems that you may encounter along the way. Our contact details are below, and I hope you have fun using the system.